Authored by Alastair Crooke via the Strategic Culture Foundation, it's not just a trade war, behind that hides a tech war, and behind that lie the plans for a full-spectrum arms race, from space to cyber. As one U.S. current commander put it, fields of data and information, that's what modern war runs on. What are the missions we do in space today? Provide information, provide pathways for information. In conflict, we deny adversaries access to that information, so, the new arms race is as much about retaining and advancing U.S. tech leadership in chip evolution, quantum computing, big data and artificial intelligence, AI, for weaponry, as it is just about tech-led in the economic sphere, i.e., dominating civilian industry standards for the next generation of those smart electronic gadgets that we all will buy. So, what is going on? Well, the U.S. military complex is for real on this. They're gearing up for the coming military standoff with China. Constant harking on themes that China is stealing America's technology, its know-how and its data, and now the barrage of allegations about China hacking, and shades of the Russiagate interfering in U.S. elections, essentially, but not wholly, is about shaping a casus belli versus China. The rude fact is that the U.S. military were shocked to find how far they were falling behind Russia and China in high-tech weaponry. A bipartisan, expert U.S. Defense Department report submitted to Congress in November warned America's military edge is diminished, and in some cases erased, just as rival countries are getting savvier, stronger and more aggressive. America could lose the next war it fights. It might struggle to win, or perhaps lose, a war against China or Russia. If the United States had to fight Russia in a Baltic contingency, or China in a war over Taiwan, Americans could face a decisive military defeat. Adversaries have studied the U.S. military strategies, and learned how to counter them, said Commission co-chair Eric Edelman. They've learned from our success, and while we've been off doing a different kind of warfare, they've been prepared for a kind of warfare at the high end, that we really haven't engaged in for a very long time. Ordinary Americans have not been accustomed to think of China as a threat, maybe as commercial threat, yes, but not as a military opponent, per se. But the stream of allegations about how China is stealing America's prosperity and jobs are intended to change that. Public opinion is being groomed for conflict. So is this all about the U.S. tech rivalry with China? Well, unfortunately no. It is simply that a casus belli for Russia is unnecessary. Russia has been so integrated as an adversarial antinomy, so commingled into domestic U.S. politics, that any grooming of the public simply is superfluous. It is taken for granted now that Russia is enemy. Trump's foreign policy hawks, such as John Bolton and Mike Pompeo, have in their gun sights Russia, as much as China. The defense report to Congress makes that clear. It is China and Russia, but it is that the hawks do not blow so much smoke about Russian malignity as China, as there is a public to be convinced about China. The tactics for this tech Cold War have been set out by administration officials quite clearly: forbid the export of emerging or foundational technologies, restrict tech access to individuals, as well as companies, and write sanctions to cover the range of foundational technologies, and tech manufacture know-how, and cut off China from key supply line component makers, and badger Europeans to boycott Chinese tech. And Russia? Is it somehow apart from this war? Well, Russia, plainly, is different. It doesn't have the same interpenetration with the U.S. on tech, and its defense and avionics capabilities are largely homegrown, albeit with some limited vulnerability in terms of component requirements. But America has other, foundational, technology know-how, and the tech war principles of denial towards China can be applied just as readily to Russia, albeit in a slightly different mode. Trump has made a point of declaring that the U.S. intends to be globally energy dominant. And the U.S. Interior Secretary has, in parallel, linked America's energy primacy to the possibility of a physical blockade on Russian oil exports. Ryan Zinke told the Washington Examiner in September that the U.S. Navy has the ability to blockade Russia from controlling energy supplies. The economic option on Iran and Russia is, more or less, leveraging and replacing fuels. We can do that because the United States is the largest producer of oil and gas. In practice, such action is unlikely. It is bombast. The U.S. wants crude prices down, not up. But the point here, rather, is the U.S. focus on Russian energy. Zinke's remarks demonstrate the DC mindset. Russia's a one-trick pony, he said, underlining that Russia's ability to sell energy is paramount to its economic survival. But the China tech war precedents, in terms of component denial and sanctioning technology transfer, are not only more plausible in the case of Russia, they already are happening, i.e. in the threats surrounding Nord Stream 2, which mirror the arm-twisting Europeans are experiencing against purchasing Huawei's 5G infrastructure. Again, as with the case of China, the U.S. is pressing on multiple geopolitical pressure points onto Russia, simultaneously with trying to hobble it economically, through sanctions. Next year, almost certainly, it is a legal requirement, the U.S. will unleash a new torrent of Russia sanctions in respect to the Skripal event. Is this just saber-rattling to keep American imperial spirits high? Should we take seriously the notion of the U.S. administration triggering geopolitical shocks, sufficient to shake what is left of the global system? I think it quite possible. President Trump will be mired in the coming year with saving himself, his family, and his businesses from myriad investigations on the one hand. On the other, he will be fighting the Democrats in Congress, and, should the markets tank badly, his leverage over Senate Republicans will evaporate. There are enough Renos, Republicans in name only, ready to cheer on a Brutus, when conditions become ripe. And beyond the U.S., many potential flashpoints are evident. The Gulf is fearful. Saudi Arabia is in internal conturbation. Poroshenko is trying to save his political skin. America has been, until yesterday, attempting to sustain a long-term military occupation in Syria, to which Turkey is militantly opposed. Israel is flexing muscles on Hezbollah's doorstep, and with Europe on the cusp of a possible economic downturn, the Yellow Jacket symptoms likely will erupt, in response, in diverse apparitions. Brexit, Italy, sovereign debt spreads, banks, all spell rising risks, whether containable or not, we shall see. But here is the point: whilst Trump is glued to his TV, tracking every twist and turn to the domestic assault on his sensitive self-esteem, his two warrior wings, the China hawks and the Middle East hawks, will be piloting at the NSC controls, under the Crafts captain, Mr. John Bolton. What are the risks of major policy mistakes, maladministration, internal U.S. paralysis, U.S. market doldrums, and a distracted president, permitting his ideological hawks to trigger some volatile flashpoint? Quite high, maybe.